back, guys, to another episode of the Footy GameDay SquadShow. I'm your host, Cal, and joining me today, I've only got KERMS as we dive into a very, very special episode of our team review. KERMS, do you know why it's special?
I do. You haven't stopped speaking about it. It's the Port Pair. We're back.
Yeah, I'm obviously a massive fan. I never shut up about my team. This was a review I found quite hard to do. Obviously, I'm really excited with some of our players, but having to go back and have a think about some of the stuff that happened last year did hurt because it's, as we'll get into, ended in a very sour note. So I reckon let's get it out of the way. Let's
do it. Let's get stuck in.
Alrighty, Kerm. We're going to get into my beloved Power and have a look at how their 21 season went. As you can see there, 17 wins, 5 losses, and which finished second on the ladder. Yeah, looking at it, it looks good on paper. Obviously, a good qualifying win against Geelong, but that prelim hurt. I'll get into that in a second. I want to start by talking about our highlights for the year. And there wasn't a particular game, and I'll get into that in a moment. I really wanted to highlight our recruiting. So I think Aliir was the recruit of the season. I'll get into him more in the show. I love that guy. He is so good. And even Orazio Fantasia. Took us a while. We wanted him for a couple of years. Finally got him over for the Bombers, and he came over in his first season. Injury interrupted, but was able to score 2 goals a game and made a big difference. So on top of that, I think on a personal level, watching Ollie Wines and Port Adelaide win their first Brownlow medal was obviously a really, really big highlight for the club.
Special moment.
Yeah, we kind of all joked. We had like a bit of a chat in our early podcasts and early shows and things like that about who we thought might win. And yeah, Ollie Wines, I sort of said it being the Port homer, but yeah, didn't actually think he'd hold out the Bont and Petrarca, but he got the job done, which is good on for him. Lowlights. This is the hard part of the show. That prelim. You'd wait 2 weeks for footy, and you're so excited. It was the Friday night game. It was a Saturday night game. I can't remember. It's all a big blur because I know the Geelong was a blowout one as well. And yeah, inside 20 minutes it's over. And we were just slaughtered, I think the word is. We just looked like, so subpar. And I've spoken in the past about, I like to feel like I'm a pretty good loser, even being, massive Port fan that I am. I can sit and look at that sort of Richmond loss that we had in the prelim a couple of years ago and be like, you know what? Richmond were the better team. We played really well. I think in the dry we win that. It was raining. I think that played into Richmond's hands. Bigger, more mature bodies. But I could throw my hands up and go, you know what? We had an awesome season. We'll come back better next year. This one I can't. This one we played awful. It's not like we actually played well and were beaten by a better team. I think we were beaten by a better team, and I'll get into that. But we didn't play well. So that stings, and I really hope it does sting for a while. Yeah. What did you feel about those prelims, watching as a neutral point of view?
It was hard because you sort of learn to like Port, and I've been such a big fan of the way you guys have drafted, and we'll talk about the guys that you guys have drafted later on, but Connor Rosie, Zach Butters, Xavier Dersma, that draft class is absolutely incredible. So you start to fall in love with those young players, and then Ollie Wines I've been a big fan of for a long time, but as a fantasy community, we've been waiting for him to make that leap, and to see him finally do that consistently, it was so good to watch. So it was hard, and to see it, you're so right. When you're watching the game, it's over within 2 minutes, 20 minutes. The first quarter done, and you're sitting there like, oh well, what did we wait for that for? But you guys will be back in a bigger, better way, and we'll talk to that. We'll talk more about that a lot more in the future of this podcast.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Port was halfway through the season, we had like 2 or 3 losses back to back, and there was like the Cats, the Dogs, the Demons, and I sort of was like, we're not good enough. I was on the record saying, we're not good enough this year, we're a cut below. But then they reeled me back in, and they started, that win against the Dogs, and had me starting to think, we finished second, but then, bang, prelim, completely changes my mind. But I couldn't look past the fact that it took us to round 15 to beat a top 8 side.
Yes.
I look at it, and I look at that second place, and even as a Port fan, I reckon you'd struggle to find a less deserving team of a second place finish, because we didn't deserve it. I think there were better teams than us. Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on them, but that's how I feel. But let's move on. Let's talk about some good stuff. Who do you have as the star of the year? I think it's going to be pretty obvious.
Yeah, so this is an obvious one. It's Ollie Wines. And as I mentioned, we've been waiting as a fantasy community for this guy to take the next leap, and he just did it in such a big way. 32 disposals overall, 4 tackles a game, 4 marks a game. Was able to get forward and kick some goals at crucial points, and he was just so unstoppable at clearances. He was 10th in total stoppage clearances, and 6th in total effective disposals on the year. And obviously he's got the Charlie to go with it. So he is my player of the year for the Port pair.
Yeah, really good one. Really good one. I would have gone him, but I actually think there was a player that played better than Ollie Wines for his position. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Big call. But he's not a fantasy player, so we won't speak a lot about him going forward. So I want to give him his flowers. Alia.
Yeah.
That guy, I know I already said about Recruit of the Year. That guy was phenomenal. You look in the league, I would say he's closer to being head and shoulders as the number one best sort of that defender, that role he plays, than like Ollie Wines, and like the 10th best midfielder. That's the sort of I'd much rather die on the hill that he's in the, head and shoulders above than Ollie Wines is the top 10 midfielder in the league. I just rate him so much.
He's electric.
10 contested marks. 10 intercept marks on the showdown, set the record in the AFL. And that's like, there was a month there where it had me thinking like long way back. I hadn't seen a Port Adelaide player play that well in a month of footy than say Treadray back at his peak in 2004.
Yeah.
But when we were making our push and starting to get excited, I was looking at him and being like, teams just couldn't figure it out. He was just finding himself, getting himself loose and just getting these contested marks. And yeah, I loved it. And I loved having him over from the Swans. So yeah, massive win. And I really hope he bounces and bounces back, continues it on, because yeah, him playing that well was really exciting to watch. It's really fun watching these other key forwards try and get free and him just coming over the top. But
it's too athletic and too quick. His close down speed is too fast for anybody.
Yeah, well, I will give the Dogs credit. They game planned for it perfectly. We'd seen a couple teams try and do it. They put Josh Shackey on him in the took him out of the game. Shackey was just holding him
one-on-one.
Yeah. So I wonder how Port looked to sort of play that when you're almost tagging your loose back. So yeah, no, I can sit here and talk about Ali all day. I'll do that off the air with you later. Yes. What about the disappointments of the year? Who'd you go with?
I went with SPP, Sam Powell-Pepper, and it's just because there was so much hype going into the season about what Sam Powell-Pepper was going to produce in 2021, and we just got nowhere near seeing what we wanted to see. In 2020, the Corona Ball season, less time on the field, he actually averaged more disposals than he did last year. And he started his career really well. His rookie season, 17 disposals. Next season, 19 disposals. Season after that, 18 disposals. But in 2021, he only averaged 13 disposals a game. That's a massive regression for me. And I wanted to see more from him. I was a little bit disappointed, hence the disappointment of the year for me.
Yeah, he was one that really burst onto the scene. Like, he's one of those guys you take from the draft, and he had the body to play AFL round one. It's kind of like Ollie Wines came in. I remember his quads in his first year were like already biggest in the just massive, but yeah, it's just like that improvement. You're like, it just hasn't come, and it's obviously a very competitive midfield. But yeah, that's a fair one. This one hurts. Probably tough to give it to a guy in only his third year of footy and actually had a career high in touches. But I've given it to Connor Rosey.
Fair enough.
And again, it's more the hype. So he burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, and he was just phenomenal. And last year he took a step back with his injuries, and it was just really disappointing that he just didn't take the step for me to become that sort of 100-point fantasy game player. And we know the potential's there. We know how good he is, but just for whatever reason, he just couldn't go. He just couldn't do it. He was scoring less goals, less tackles, and it was just those little things. It was almost become a little bit cuter than sort of when he was first burst onto the scene.
Yeah.
And sort of, he kind of looked like he just lost that sort of, fear of like he didn't fear anything in this first year, and that's what made him so good, so electric. And he just sort of looked like he was sort of playing within himself a lot, and yeah, just hasn't lived up to the guy that I was hoping he would be when he first burst out. So I'm hoping that he still might be a future star, but yeah, these are my disappointment for the year.
Still think he will be. There were times where he kicked a bag, he looked like a mini Robbie Gray, and everything was going to be fine and dandy. But yeah, I know what you mean. He didn't take the leap that we all wanted, but hopefully there's still so much raw talent in those draft picks for all three of them.
And I think the other thing I've got to say too is that prelim sucked, and this is harsh because I think the whole team played quite poorly, but he was noticeably terrible.
Yeah.
And every time he had the ball, he was facing the wrong way. And there was just a few times he kind of ducked out a contest and things like that. And it's super harsh because, he's so talented, better footy player than, I could ever dream of being.
Yeah.
But it's just those little things, games on the line, and you just look at it and that stings with me. I can still almost see him near side wing backing out of a challenge, and just that hurts. But I'm really hoping that it hurts him as much as it sort of hurts me and other Port fans, and he comes back next year and sort of really bursts onto it. But what about grades? Because the grades have just come up there, and we've gone with some completely different views. So
really?
Talk me through your A, because as you can see,
I gave him an A.
Different.
I really liked their season. I thought for what their list is, to finish second on the ladder, I think is a massive, massive win for you guys. And you got so many young players. We'll talk about them later. But to see the likes of Ollie Wines take his game to the next level, I think. What have you given them?
I give him a C+.
Wow.
Yeah. So
second on the ladder.
Like I said, very poor second. Very poor second. I had high hopes for us, and I think if you go back, we weren't premiership favourites with the bookies, but a lot of people were saying primed for it. Lost in a prelim, looked close. Reminded me of 2013-14 when we made the prelim and sort of everyone was gearing us up for 2015. We kind of fell off the cliff, but we beat one top 4 side all year, and that was the Dogs in round 23, if you don't include the qualifying final. So when we were playing against the other good teams, we just weren't good enough. So I really did think we were a little bit of a flat track bully. And the thing as well that people forget, and why I started getting on the train of Port Adelaide and getting myself excited again, was when we hit that prelim final, we had 22 of our best 23 players available. So It's very rare you get to the end of the season and we'd had lost one player for a season-ending injury. The rest we had the whole squad to choose from. Home prelim, had a crowd when everyone did in COVID, and I think getting back to that level was sort of par for me. And then obviously they were just disappointing. So I'm not going to give them a fail because I still think they grow. There's still some highlights, but you'd be pushing it to get anything higher than a B. But you know what I mean? Shrug your sheet. It's like you're in the NBA.
I see where you're coming
from. Remember when Westbrook won the scoring? Remember when Westbrook won the scoring title, and he's like, "Yep, well done, fantastic."
Yeah. I feel like
I'm sitting here in the playoffs.
Yeah. You're not a Geelong though. You know what I mean? You're not all in on a win now. You don't have these big name players. You haven't traded your future assets for big name players. You're relying a lot on players. Like Ryan Burton, Dan Houston, Xavier Dersma, Connor Rosie, Willem Drew, Mitch Georgiades, who are all really young players and super talented. So I just thought for the roster you guys have, I think you overperformed finishing second. But I do know what you mean. Being a flat track bully, I can see it. It's just that finish for me that was really impressive considering who you got.
Yeah, and just quickly, I worry, and what I really want, we're going to get into this a little bit later. I love Travis Boak, but I just look in that sort of level. Him, you look at Robbie Gray as well. Still brilliant players, but you're kind of they're both 34 now, and it's kind of if not now, when?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we might have to do a bit of a reset, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a second. But we'll have to calculate our averages where we sit, but I'm sure they'll be up on the screen when we come back to them, and you'll be able to see where we've sat Port against the other teams. But very different views. So we'll find the middle ground and we'll stick them in between. So
we will.
Alrighty, so let's have a look at how we think my Power are going to do for the year ahead. And what you've got there, you can kind of see, I've got them moving up the ladder. I kind of think they're going to be around where they were thereabouts this year in sort of 2020. Even that 2020 when we finished on top, I didn't quite think we were ready yet. I thought that was a good year, but I actually have us finishing 5th.
Okay.
I think that's a bit closer to our floor. There's just something I'm a little bit unsure about. I think there's been too many times where, I love Ken Hinkley. What he did for the club will always have a special place in my heart, where he came in when we had banners up in the stands and really sort of gathered everyone. But you start to go, this is a very good list. How many years do we have to go through the is Ken Hinkley's job safe discussion before, something actually happens? And so that sort of hanging over the head's never great. There's not the complete trust behind him. And like I said, I'm just not sure if we're going to see. We had Wine's best ever year. Travis Boak, 34, phenomenal. We're going to lose. You'd only imagine that should drop down a little bit. And we've got some really good young players, but there's also some very, very good teams around us. And, Charlie Dixon's a player we rely heavily on, and we just don't have that second tall down forward. Like, Marshall hasn't quite taken it yet. I really like Mitch Georgiades, but probably not ready to sort of be that, really kick us to sort of a top 4, win a prelim type thing. So, yeah. How do you feel like I do see the scenario where they do win the premiership, but I'm not as confident as, say, I was 12 months ago.
Yeah, so I think they can win the premiership. I think it's going to be a close race up the top with the big boys, but a 3rd, 4th, 5th finish is, for me, very fair. And I think you guys have one of the best spines in the league. I mean, you got Tom Jonas and Aaliyah down back. You got Jeremy Finlayson now, Mitch Georgiades, and Charlie Dixon you spoke about up front. And you're obviously a midfielders right now, one of the best in the league. So I think your spine right now is going to take you guys a long way, given everybody's fit and healthy. So a 3rd, 4th, 5th finish right now, I think is quite fair. And when you finish in those positions, you're going to make a play for the premiership. So it's definitely in contention for sure.
Yeah, I feel like with our team, if you match us up, maybe this is me being biased, I'd love you to call it out if it is. Maybe aside from Melbourne, if you go 22 versus 22 and you go position by position, I rate our talent. Our talent is as good as anyone else in the league, in my opinion.
I agree.
There's just sometimes there's just something off. I just don't always love the way we go forward. We can be very electric, we can be awesome to watch, but there's just always something, and we seem like one-dimensional almost. Like Aaliyah, brilliant, but when that's not working, it's like we lose by 10 goals. And it's like that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be sort of that.
Yeah.
You're great when you're great, but then if someone figures you out, it's a 10-goal swing. But yeah. Anyway, I'm sure everyone's sick of me talking about the power. Let's talk about our fantasy players coming out of them, because there is a fair few, in my opinion, that you'd be going after. So who do you have? Who are you targeting for this upcoming Game Day Squad season?
Yeah, so the lock that I've identified is Zach Butters, and I'm so excited. He's one of my favourite fantasy assets going into this season. I'm so excited to get him into my team, and I'll be doing everything to do it. He took his game to another level, 18 disposals a game, impact the score sheet, 4 marks a game, 3 tackles a game, and he's got that forward position as well in fantasy. But there's a lot of whispers, there's a lot of talk that he's going to be spending a lot of time in the guts with the next guy on my list who will be knocking on my door, Ollie Wines. And the only reason he's not in my best 22 is I've selected approximately 15 different midfielders in this podcast series. So I love the guy. He is so good. I've loved him in fantasy before, and he's finally taken that next step into piggery. But he's not going to be making my best 22 because there's been so many. And I will be avoiding Robbie Gray, which sucks because I've loved watching this guy play for so long. He's been so good for Port. He's been so clutch. But for me in fantasy, he's slowing down a little bit. We've spoken about him before in the podcast, how his age is affecting him and how much he's getting on ball and ball in hand in general. So I'm going to be steering clear of Robbie Gray, as sad as that makes me.
Yeah, fair enough. And with Robbie Gray, I think people forget he did his ACL quite early in his career. And he came back and he was amazing. Like, not many people do an ACL and come back as good as he's been, but unfortunately, injuries do catch up on you, and you just never know with him. But no, I like those picks a lot. With me, I've got Wines in my team. For me, he's just the perfect model of consistency, and I think Brownlow Knight showed that, where he hit the record for the most games polled, the most amount of individual games polled, and he obviously won the Brownlow because of that, which was amazing. Take him to the bank every week, and he will deliver for you. I've got Butters. So very similar reasons for you. I'm going to touch on him a bit in a second, but yeah, I could easily see him pushing 100 and sort of really being in that sort of top 5 forward spots or top 6 forward 100%. Spots as well.
100%.
I've also got Carl Amon. So
this
is
cool.
a guy who, So I really do like him. I think he's finally getting the flowers he deserves by sort of breaking into that sort of 40-man All-Australian squad. And fantasy and footy aside, I'm not sure if you've heard this guy's story and some of the stuff he had to go through when he was younger, health-wise, to get here. Like, just an awesome year. Awesome story. And then this year, 36th overall rating. And at 26, if you were to tell me that Boak was to sort of step out a little bit more and Gray was to step out of the midfield a little bit more, I could see him taking up that role a little bit more. So he's someone I want to keep around, potentially to jump in. And avoiding, this one hurts, Travis Boak.
T-Boak. 3 votes.
Yeah. Last time this guy didn't play over 20 games was in 2012. not including the COVID year. And since 2011, the lowest average score he's had has been 99. Just like an absolute warrior. And he holds a special place in my heart too. I don't know if you remember, Geelong flew out to him. They had Selwood and all that. They were trying to recruit him. He committed to Port. And again, same sort of time as the Ken Hinkley changed around. But so I don't like doing this.
Club legend.
I was going to say, I don't mind getting rid of all the other club legends in the other series, Dangerfield, Selwood, if we're just cutting them all loose. But no, at 34, I just imagine it more. I don't see the quality dropping off. I just see the midfield time dropping off. They maybe push him forward and, it wouldn't be as electric there. Because he's never been a massive goal scorer. So, he'd be a good forward player, but I don't think he'd be the one that would pipe up with a few goals. So, yeah, I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he continues going on because he's an absolute star. So,
interesting. Alrighty, now before we get stuck into some Dynasty fantasy assets that we're going to be talking about, Cal, I just wanted to run by you, right? Port Adelaide, your beloved Port Adelaide, were very lucky last year with injuries and form changes and stuff like that. It had a very consistent team. It's not always going to be as peachy and rosy in fantasy football, we know that. So what happens when a player has come out of form? You want to kick him out of your starting 22. You want to get this player out because he's injured. What are the rules and squad rules around this?
Yeah, of course. So like any fantasy game, there are rules to just stop players completely changing their team week on week. So we do take a bit of a system where you can have unlimited cards at your disposal, but we do want to protect the fantasy aspect of it as well. So what we've got a couple of different things, and I'll jump into them. So you've got your sort of active team. So imagine your 18 players that play on the field, your 4 on the bench, that sort of thing that you normally are used to. But on top of that, we've kind of got your squad players, and in your squad, you've got 8 people. So this is for the AFL. The NRL game's a little bit different, of course, but you're here because you're here for the AFL. So you got 30 people in this active squad. Now, they can move around freely week to week, and then there's a thing called your reserves. You're only allowed to change or make 2 players change from your reserves to your active squad week to week. So let's say, for example, you open a pack. You can't just put them straight in your active squad. If you packed 3 new players you want to bring in, you want to bring it into that 30 of yours, you can only bring in 2 a week. Now, they do add up. So, for example, if I don't use 2 one week, I'll have 4 the next week to use. And you can actually do more. So let's say, for example, I did open a pack and I want to bring 9 players in. You can actually bring in more, but there is going to be a penalty to it. So you will have a deduction from your fantasy score. So the exact amount is going to be released very, very soon, but very similar to an EPL fantasy if you've played that before, where you can make additional changes, but they're going to be at a cost. So you have to figure out and be like, for example, if it's 50 points, you have to go, right, is changing that player going to make up that 50 points in that week or in the long run? So yeah, they're the rules that we have about it. Like we said, people might have 100 players at their disposal, but you have to be very careful about who you start with in that 30. So yeah, really excited to see how people go around it. A lot of strategy. Do you try and have players as consistent? Do you try and have some high upside, hot and cold players that you play when they're in form? So yeah, really keen to see how people go about it.
Absolutely. You can be your own general manager. There's a lot you can do.
Yeah.
There's so much customization for your squad you can do in GDS. So really keen to get stuck in.
Yeah, of course. And shame on you for, again, bringing up how Port had embarrassment of riches to choose from and still got asses kicked in the prelim. Let's get on to your future star. Who did you go with? Because you could pick a couple here.
You could. There are a few you could pick. And I said this to you offline. I've said this to Tom as well. But my biggest lock in fantasy this year is Zach Butters. I love him. And he's a forward player. He's got forward status. He is so good. I'm so excited. There's so much upside potential in Zach Butters. It's not funny. And you might even get a little bit of value for him at the start of the season because it's no secret that he will be getting that midfield time. Such a good user. He's only 21 years old, so you're going to have him in your team for the next 10 years if you want that. But Zach Butters is the biggest fantasy lock for me this year.
I love that. And as you know, when we were working on Game Day Squad for the last 9 months, the example of the star player I always used was Connor Rozee.
Yeah.
Prelim changed my mind, and I've also doubled down. Future star is Zach Butters.
Nice.
I love this guy. If you want to go after that bread, you got to have something to butter. You got to have some butter with it. So I love him. So when Rozee wasn't doing his thing and Dersma wasn't doing his bow and arrows and scoring, this guy was stepping up. 4 goals and a quarter against the Cats, I think, showed you how brilliant he can be.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about him, fantasy, all the stuff we talk about him being a forward player, getting midfield minutes, from that side of things, it's fantastic. But just talking about AFL and the actual games, he's our team's barometer. I know that Aaliyah and Wines are better players, but looking at it, when Butters is on, our team's on. He's just that player for me. And yeah, I love seeing that. Sky's the limit. And yeah, he's a bit of a prick to play against. I don't know if you've seen him show and chat and stuff. So I love that. You want a bit of that in your team as well. So no, really, really cool. I'm glad you've gone with him because, yeah, guys, I'm going to be chasing that one-of-one.
Oh, I'm so hungry to get him.
Hit me up, DM me. you probably, I'll empty my bank account to get it. So, yeah, that is the player I'm going after. What about some of those other upside potential players? So potentially a player that, isn't as a lock as Butters, but someone that you see real upside with.
Yeah, so the two upside players I've got are the guys he got drafted with, Xavier Dersma and Connor Rosie. And I know Connor Rosie's had a pretty bit of a disgusting year last year, but I still see a lot of potential in him, and I'm going to stack these two in my squad so I can have them there just in case they hit a purple patch and they can get into my team, because the potential of these three players could be one of the best draft hauls in a single draft of all time.
Yeah, I really think so too. I'm biased, of course, but when we talk about stacking, these guys are stacking, put them together. That's a good group. I went Rosie as well. I still love him. I do. I just in a love-hate relationship. I need to see him play another game of football where it's not the prelim. He's
it's prelim. It's still. It
didn't help. I was at the gym the other day, and what are they doing? They're playing highlights of the game, and I see him.
God.
And it I swear when I noticed it, it was like a highlights video. It was him doing the pulling out of the contest on the near side wing. That's why it's probably ingrained in my memory. Dersma I can talk about, but I'm not sure from a fantasy point of view. I just love that guy. I swear I just watch the games just to see if he score a goal and just pull out his bow.
It's so sick. I love it.
Love it. I'm going to give you someone who's just been drafted. Josh Sin.
Yes, yeah.
Port were pretty aggressive. They traded up for this guy. So I think they were at 14. They traded up to 12 with West Coast, running half back. And you probably haven't been watching the Port preseason games with the intra clubs. He's killed it. He's going to start on a half-back flank. He's brilliant, and it's a huge call to sort of say, I want him in my team, but I don't think I'll be waiting around because I think he's going to be a pretty hot commodity, because even Port's one of those teams where our half-back gets a lot of the footy because we play that sort of back-and-forth style of footy. So even if we are competitive for the next sort of future, which we'll get into, I still think there'll be a lot of ball for him there. So
I really like that pick.
Yeah, I do too. It's very rare you sort of see teams trade up aggressively for a player like that, particularly in the AFL. What we are going to see, though, is we're going to see it in Game Day Squad when we have our draft. If anyone is interested in the draft or likes AFL drafts, NBA drafts, NRL drafts, whatever you're into, NRL doesn't have a draft, but they will on our platform. I guarantee you, if you love the idea of a draft, a lottery, and all that sort of stuff, you're going to love what we're going to produce.
You've got to stay tuned, 100%.
Yeah, it is. It has been called my Pirates of the Pancreas for those Rick and Morty fans when we're talking about developing our platform. I love it. I can't wait to be able to share it with everyone. That's going to be released later on in the year. But dynasty perspective, how do we think Port are going to go in the next 3 to 5 years? I have them there at sort of the bottom end of tier 1.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know what you would define as this year going for a premiership. Maybe you throw it in there. I do like them. I do think that window's open, but like you said, it is very hard at the top because Melbourne's the best team. Melbourne should take it this year. And then you look at teams like the Lions, who I kind of think sneaky as well, are going to be very similar sort of trajectory with Port. Had a couple of disappointing final series, but at any moment could flick the switch and turn into a really, really good team. So yeah, it'll be tough. But yeah, how do you see it from an outsider point of view?
I agree. And your list is, we've spoken about Robbie Gray, Travis Boak, who have been so instrumental to this team, but are starting to get it to an age where we're going to see a decline. But you still have players like Aaliyah, Tom Jonas, Darcy Byrne-Jones, who are at the late 20s, who are at the peak of their game. So many players that haven't hit their peak yet. So many players. Xavier Dersma, we've spoken about. Connor Rosie, we've spoken about. These players who haven't even touched the potential yet are still going to be hitting that. And then you got the likes of Josh Sin and whoever else you bring in later on. So I really like this.
And whatnot.
Yep, Lukosius, Isaac Rankin, blah, blah, yeah. But no, it's you guys. I think you're gonna be up the top for. I'm trying to give you a clever rap.
I don't want you to rap. I just want your players. That's what we want. We want your South Australian players. Paul Francis can come to us. Yeah. No, sorry, that's rude cutting you off like that. But
no,
I've
it is
been
fair.
Sitting there for a while.
We laugh.
I'll throw it back to you. Tom normally does this, but do you want to have a go at trying to tell our listeners what we want from them?
Yes. You guys need to like, subscribe, hit the notifications button. You need to make sure that you're keeping in touch with all our socials. Facebook, we're on Discord now. There'll be a link down the bottom for that. Instagram, Twitter, all of the above. Make sure you go like, follow, show some love to us. But yeah, keep listening to the podcast, guys. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, it's all on there. Make sure you do your thing and make sure you're getting game day ready for Monday.
Yeah, of course, for our launch. And we've got the Tigers next, which, bit of a preview to that one. It was a very, very weird one to do.
Yes.
Maybe the hardest review I had to do.
I agree.
Very, very tough to talk about. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm excited for that. Hopefully you Richmond fans are. But yeah, keen to talk to everyone about that. So stay tuned, guys, and we'll see you then.
See you later.